No, welcome to Let Them Talk. And let's move everybody over and have a foot.
No problem.
And
Great show for you tonight.
We do. And Joni, why don't you introduce? I'm Paul DiRienzo, and this is Joan Muth. And Cynthia Copeland is our
guest. She's here from the New York Historical Society. She's one of a team of curators who has a show up right now called Legacies. Contemporary artists reflect on slavery. And thank you very much for coming. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to be here.
Well, it's a wonderful exhibit. I have a lot of questions for you, but I'd like to start out with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and the other curators and what inspired you to have an art show at a historical society.
It's a very good question, and what everyone asks us a lot today. The New York Historical Society has been interpreting slavery and slavery in New York in particular, and we have a public historian who wants to make history accessible to the masses, and I'm an education curator, and that's my job, to try to encourage people to learn about history through primary sources and art. And then we had a wonderful guest curator, Lowry Stokes-Sims from the Studio Museum, and she graciously agreed to join us and to advise us to make sure that we were sort of on the right track, bringing art to the New York Historical Society, where we have 200-plus-year-old history of very old items from the collection.
Tell us a little bit about your collection. Before we get into talking about legacies, I think folks don't really fully understand when they walk the streets of New York its ancient history, and it's history like hundreds of years. And the fact that African Americans were here from almost the very first day, coming eventually as indentured servants with the Dutch initially. And I know you had an exhibit on slavery in New York, for example, that was very important and made a big impact in New York. What led to Legacies, and what do you have in your collection at the New York Historical Society?
Well, that's really a terrific question. Again, we have a collection. The New York Historical Society is 202 years old, and we're located on the Upper West Side. A lot of people see the building and feel that, oh, maybe this isn't a museum for me with the name Society in it, but when you walk in, it's just like New York's biggest attic with incredible collections. We have paintings, we have sculpture, we have ceramics, we have a library that consists of manuscripts and documents, and so there's so much rich history to interpret in telling the story of slavery or any topic in New York. And so we've been mulling around the idea of exploring that topic. A lot of people think, slavery, New York? That's impossible. How could that happen? We're so liberal and we love one another, and that could never happen. It's only in the South. It just couldn't happen. And then, surprise, surprise, we have a lot of the New York City's, the economy was built on the backs of individuals who were brought over involuntarily. And so the Historical Society decided a few years ago that we wanted to explore that. It was a very difficult and sensitive approach because we didn't want to you want people to be able to approach it and to understand it and not cast aspersions at one group, and so we worked very hard to try to make it a little bit of a balanced show. And
Tell us a little bit about some of the things you have, some of these items.
Well, also in conjunction with that, why don't we talk about Fred Wilson, is that his name? Who was an installation artist that took artifacts from your collection to create a special installation for the show.
What are some of those artifacts?
Yeah.
Well, some of the artifacts that Fred has chosen to use, we have a balustrade from the original Federal Hall or City Hall. In 1789, George Washington was sworn in as the first president. And
right here in New York.
Right here in New York, in Lower Manhattan. It's on the site of today's Customs House when you go down to Broad Street. That building is not the original building, but the balustrade was certainly there and became a part of our collection. And he has also chosen to use several busts of George Washington. We have a classic George, and we have what he refers to as a mean George. And we have a bust of Napoleon also in the installation. Then there's a cigar figurine that is in the shape, he's been carved as an African American, and he's resting on a pole, and he's holding an edition that we added, a Liberty Cap. And then on the other side of the installation, we have an assortment of manacles, shackles, slave tags that were used in South Carolina when enslaved people were hired out to do certain types of work. On the slave badges, you have the type of occupation, so we have porters and servants. You also have the year that the person was doing that particular job, and then there's another number to indicate that they would be paying taxes on their work. So, and then we have a lovely miniature of Toussaint Louverture, which is painted. It's a watercolor that's on a piece of ivory, and it's an absolutely exquisite piece. And so Fred is looking at the notions of liberty and what does that mean and how it's all negotiated, depends upon your perspective, where you're coming from, and trying to engage the objects in dialogue and juxtaposing
And tell us about
them
what a
differently.
liberty cap is, because
Sure.
this was a really beautiful sort of addition to the whole collection of things that he put together.
Yes, the Liberty Cap is, it's just sort of a ski cap with a point, if you think about it, and they tend to be, they're red. And in ancient Rome, when people were released from bondage, from slavery, they were bestowed with this Liberty Cap. It's also known as a Phrygian cap. And that was your symbol of liberty, and several revolutionaries have adopted that. Whenever you look at images of the American Revolution or the French Revolution or the Haitian Revolution, you see that cap being waved in the images. And also a lot of the states, when they were incorporated, they established a seal. You will see images of Columbia or Minerva holding a liberty pole, and atop that pole will be a liberty cap.
Right, so this is all from New York history, and so the artist took these items. You actually gave the artist access to these items.
To the artifacts.
He
yeah.
basically mined
Is
the
that sort of
museum.
unusual for a museum to do that?
It is, but that's what Fred does. And if you invite Fred Wilson into your museum, you can expect to have him mine your museum and just create these incredible installations through juxtapositions.
Right. By the way, we I don't have it posted today, but we have a phone number for folks who'd like to call in and ask questions to Cynthia Copeland. Our number is 212-757-1538. That's 212-757-1538. And we'll take your calls and your questions
Join in the conversation.
about this fascinating subject. Seneca, you did something on Seneca Village.
Yes, I did.
What is Seneca Village? A lot of people, that's right up here on
And there's
86th Street.
also a piece
There is a
in the exhibit, so you
Absolutely,
can
yes.
talk about both.
Seneca Village was a community of African Americans and later Irish immigrants in the 19th century. They lived in an area that is on the site of today's Central Park. Seneca Village was roughly between 81st and 89th Streets, between 7th, what would have been 7th and 8th Avenues today, Central Park West. It was a large community. They had 3 churches. All Angels Church, which today is on the Upper West Side on 81st Street, had its roots in Seneca Village, and so did Mother Zion Church, which is up on 137th Street in Harlem. They had a church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church Branch Militant in Seneca Village, and then there was another church called the African Union Methodist Church. We know that there were cemeteries in that space at the time that the community was raised to make way for the creation of Central Park.
Raised, you mean evicted.
Evicted, and the houses just removed and torn down. That was, when that happened, there were approximately 300 residents there. It was a thriving community. Many members of the community were what we refer to as race men and women who were trying very hard to uplift the race. They were fighting for causes, for example, black male suffrage. In order for African American males to gain the vote, they were part of these organizations. There was a mutual relief society, sort of an insurance company for the community. They were promoting education among schools. There were 2 schools in the community, a greenhouse. So it was definitely thriving and a large expanse. When you think 81st to 89th, it doesn't sound that large,
Those rocks
but
there,
you take a walk through.
Rocky area
Now,
there.
where
Yes.
did they all go after it was?
Well, that's a good question. We're still investigating that. We're not sure. We suspect that some of the people moved uptown as Harlem starts to develop and the trek up north is happening. We think people went there. We think some people returned to some of the communities in the lower portion of the city or on the west side in the Tenderloin area. There was a family that I'd been following. I think they ended up in a place called Skunk Hollow in New Jersey, the Cisco family. And I'm continuing to do investigations on that family, but we think they were there.
And
some
let's
in
talk a little
Queens.
bit about the piece in the show.
Mm-hmm.
The exhibit.
So we have a wonderful piece called the Celestial Praise House. It's by
so
Leslie
beautiful.
King Hammond and Jose Mapili. And what they have done is they have created a space out of plexi. They've interpreted what a church or a praise house would look like, and they have integrated these incredible semi-precious stones and beads, and they have recreated the map, the topographical map, out of oyster shells and stones and turtles and symbols that are of very important of significance within the African American community. It's a fairly large piece, I'd say. It's low, and there are also some sequins. There's a sequins mapping with Akan symbols such as Sankofa, and it's brightly colored. When the light hits it, it just sparkles, made out of sequins. And it was hand done. The artist Leslie King Hammond, she actually sewed the beads and in recreating the map. Absolutely lovely.
When can people see these things? When is the exhibit open to the public?
The exhibition is open. The museum is open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 until 6. The exhibition is available through January 7th, 2007. So you have plenty of time, but don't think you have plenty of time, because one day you'll wake up and it'll be January 8th, and you will never have seen the show.
Everyone should see it.
And what's your website, just so people can get
Our website is www.nyhistory, spelled out, history.org.
And the thing about the exhibit that I think is so interesting is that I'm not particularly well versed in contemporary art, but it seems to me that it's an incredibly accessible exhibit, that you can learn things, you can be delighted. It's not at all depressing. I felt that the atmosphere in the room was very uplifting. And there's a piece that's like a helix with a mirror at the top and the bottom. Talk about that one a little. That one you just feel like you're traveling.
Absolutely. That piece is the Mandela and Anne Frank piece, and it's by Joe Lewis. And the idea behind the that tower, if you will, is it's about 17 feet in height and circular. And the artist wanted to have our visitors think about the relationship, the importance of learning about connections through diaries, through unfortunately the horrible atrocity of genocide, not just what occurred during the Holocaust and also during the Middle Passage, but we have wars constantly today. And so in this endless column of names, based on the Brancusi endless column of names, we have this tower that's just spectacular, and you really have to come and see it in order for me to do it justice.
Go on forever.
Exactly. You look up or down, and it just, the names are to remind you that we're all connected in one way or another, and we're all responsible for taking action. And
well, the other thing that was fascinating is this is not restricted to slavery in New York. It's not restricted to slavery in the past, and it's not restricted to slavery in the United States. There's an incredibly moving video of a man, I think his name was Simon Deng, from the Sudan.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, you don't think this is still going on, and it is.
Yeah, that's true. My colleague and co-curator Kathleen Holster and I and Larry, when we were thinking about and conceptualizing the show, we thought that we needed to, as we were approaching artists and looking at art, we recognized that there were some recurring themes such as scars, great escapes, work, that sort of thing. So we tried to gather material around those themes. We didn't arrange it that way necessarily in the exhibition, but that was the thinking behind it. And then we thought that we need to bring this to contemporary times, and we also need to tell the story of slavery on the global perspective. So we started where at one point we had a lot of stateside artists. We thought, we really need some representation from the Caribbean and from Africa too, if we can. And so the horrors that are happening over in the Sudan made us think we need to do this. And we happened upon an organization called the American Anti-Slavery Group, which is interesting. They're based in Boston, just as they were back in the 19th century. They've been at it for a while, and their website is iabolish.org. And what they do is they help to bring people who have gone through, who have been enslaved in the 20th century, and bring their stories to the States, and they serve as spokespeople telling about the atrocities that still continue today. And that's kind of how they make their living, and they're educating the public. And we have a video that is available for that. Very quite indeed. Simon Deng was enslaved from the ages of 9 to 12. He's about in his late 40s, early 50s now, and he was asked to change his name, asked to become a part of the Arabs came, and in the Sudan he just had a rough time, but he managed to escape and get back to his homeland. And once there, he determined that he wanted to have his tribal markings placed upon him, so he went through the scarification and initiation process so that people would know that I belong and this is my nation, this is who I'm with.
Wow. Talking a bit more about the overall history of slavery in New York, a lot of folks, I guess, don't really know the details of it. When was slavery finally abolished in New York State?
Slavery was abolished in 1827.
1827?
Yes.
That's not that long ago.
No, it's not that long ago at all, and considering that you have European contact in the 1600s and the levels of slavery get a little bit worse after I mean, it's bad when it's under the Dutch, but certainly when the British are here, the laws are in place, and there's an effort to control individuals. And even the discussions about abolishing slavery began in the late 1700s, and it was not an instantaneous thing. It was gradual, and enslaved children who were born after 1799, they would eventually be free, males when they were 28 years of age and girls when they were 25.
Finally, what happened? They made a decree that finally all this gradualism ended when the governor of New York State finally just made a decree. Daniel D.
Tompkins of Tompkins Square Park. Indeed, nothing.
He's buried, by the way, in
St. Mark's Cemetery.
St. Mark's Church. You know, I saw it the other day. I was
Yes.
passing by, right next to.
I'm actually a member of that church.
Stuyvesant, right next to Peter Stuyvesant's grave, which was unfortunately, unearthed by the tree that fell over.
Yes,
Now you can
there's
see
a big
the whole
hole.
Stuyvesant family underneath it. But few people know because, in a sense, what was Peter Stuyvesant's role? Was he pro or anti, or was he didn't care?
Peter Stuyvesant was a huge enslaver. He had a number of slaves and took over. Yes, he did. He did indeed.
Now, there's one thing that in the exhibit, the camera obscura, where you get to experience what it was like for this woman who was imprisoned in an attic.
Yes.
And now, you might want to explain what a camera obscura is if people don't know, but once you're inside and you just sort of settle for a few seconds, you basically see a slideshow of the items that are going on a track above this big cone.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that artist and what she was trying to do.
The artist is Ellen Driscoll, and she actually came up with this concept in 1991, and this piece has actually been around for a little while, but it doesn't show frequently. And she was moved by the story of Harriet Jacobs, who was enslaved and lived in North Carolina. Her master took great advantage of her, abused her, and she ran away and hid in the eaves of her grandmother's house. Her uncle created a space for her, and the grandmother knew she was there, so they had a little shack to send food and other items. It's based on a chapter in her book called Incidents of a Slave Girl, written under a pen name Linda Brent. And she talks about her experience in the loophole of retreat. And to her, it's just like a camera obscura where you have a tiny pinhole where you look out and light comes in and obstructs what you're looking at. You're not quite sure what you're seeing. And so the artist wanted to create that and have you have that type of experience within this small enclosed space where you lose your bearings. It's incredibly dark. There's a tiny little hole. Objects are circulating above, slowly making their revolutions. And there are these columns of light to represent the 7 years that she actually lived in that space. And she thought her children didn't know that she was there, but eventually found out that their children did know she was there, and they would hear coughing, and they would hear just some sounds that reminded them of their mother. So they chose to play just beneath this area and in the dirt and in the sand. And so the artist is playing with the idea of notions of light and suspension and spatial relationships and relations in general. And there's a flip book that is also a part of this that is designed to be sort of the pitch that you would see from an attic or rooftop. And you open the book, and there are these transparency of maps that represent North Carolina where she lived, and it's a very intense piece. You just absolutely
really
have to
is.
come down and see
To
it.
experience,
I can't ignore the similarity it has to the, to Anne Frank and the Diary of Anne Frank, and the same type of story, being years and years inside of an attic.
Exactly, and that's what's so great about the pieces in the show. Each piece has its own individual story, but when you can thread them, and they all make all kinds of connections and resonance that is just unbelievable.
Well, I would like to talk about another piece really quickly before we wrap it up. It's white frames with rhinestones around the edge, and the image is, it almost looks like a person and a piece of jewelry, and then you notice what's behind.
Yes. That piece is by Carrie James Marshall. It's called Heirlooms and Accessories. It's based on a famous photograph of a lynching from the 1930s in Indiana. Originally, there were 3 people who were going under this process of this justice system that was taken into the hands of a community, or a mob community. And one of the people, James Cameron, actually was able to escape, and he created the Holocaust Museum, which was located in Milwaukee. And he recently passed away at the age of 92, but has been telling that story. But within the piece, the artist has this whited out the image. It's sort of a reverse negative, reverse, and these images of women, the women who were accessories to this particular heinous crime, are brought out, and they are enframed in these beautiful lockets and jewels. And he's playing with the notion of hanging and circles and nooses, and but
It's
also
a very effective piece.
absolutely, it's incredibly powerful.
When
And
can people see this? We're coming to the end of the program.
Sure.
Tell us where the museum is, what time your hours are.
The museum is at 170 Central Park West, which is at 77th Street in Central Park West, Tuesday through Sunday from 10 until 6 p.m.
I definitely recommend you see it.
And NewYorkHistory.com?
NYHistory.com
Thank you
is
so
the
much,
website.
Cynthia,
You're
for being
welcome.
with
Thanks
us.
for having me.
Right. And in our last few seconds, what's your favorite?
Oh no, that's not fair. I cannot
Luckily
say,
we're going on.
I can't say that, but I have to say that we've had wonderful support from Dr. Louise Mirror, who's the president of the institution, who made sure that this show could actually come into
It's a
fruition.
very important show, and I recommend
hope
that
you
people
come.
see it. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
coming.
Thank you.
We really enjoyed
There's a lot of
talking
hidden
to
history
you.
in New York.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
All right. So,